In the year of our Lord, 1429, after 66 years of bitter warfare, the great hegemon of Beelzebub, Yersinia Rex, was finally brought down by the combined forces of the Church, led by the living saint Jeanne d'Arc. The final and cataclysmic Battle of Valence saw the destruction of most of the forces of the Black Grail in mainland Europe, thus ending the Corpse Wars. This had been Beelzebub's grand plan. He had spent 3 centuries building towards this moment, concocting the potent Black Grail and funneling so much of his power and influence into every step on the path that had been necessary to bring him to this place. In his twisted dreams, he had seen the Black Grail led by Yersinia Rex billowing across the earth like a cloud of foggy pestilence. But beneath the blade and iron faith of Jeanne d'Arc, he had finally felt the sharp sting of failure. Enraged by this defeat, the fury of Beelzebub knew no bounds. He had invested so much of the power of the Black Grail on the fallen hegemon and his legions that the hatred of the Lord of Flies turned on his failed followers. The Prince of Decay cursed his miserable progeny and cast them out of the Order of the Fly, dooming them to wander the earth, mourning for their lost hegemon until time itself is no more. With the way back to hell closed off to them, and with the lines of power to their corpulent master severed, the followers of Yersinia Rex would become the Dirge, a pale shadow of their former selves, consigned to dark corners of the no man's land, where the cleansing power of God's light couldn't reach them. But not all members of the cult of the Black Grail that took part in the Corpse Wars suffered the same fate. From the city of Ekron, where the power of Beelzebub has always been at its greatest since the Elder Days, came the priests of the Black Grail, who acted as messengers and heralds to the hegemon, advisors sent by the Lord of Flies himself to plot the conquest of the Church Heartlands. They were part of the religious rather than the military hierarchy of the Black Grail, and as such were bound to the Lord of Flies directly. When the war was lost, these high-ranking servants of the cult and their personal guard broke through the fateful encirclement and turned south. Though victorious, the exhausted and decimated forces of France, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Crown of England decided not to pursue the last remnants of the seemingly broken foe. This mistake proved to be a costly one. Had they the strength and power to hunt them down, how many lives could have been saved? But to overcome the might of Yersinia Rex was already close to miraculous, and they had taken everything the defenders had to give. There was no spirit left to drive the chase, as Europa turned in on itself to mourn the terrible cost of their own survival. Instead of fleeing towards heretic domains, the forces of Beelzebub stormed the city of Avignon. The city had been fortified against just such an occasion, but it was betrayed from within. Hidden cultists of the Lord of the Flies opened the gates to the invaders at night, led by the traitorous cardinal of the city. His name is now struck from all records, but it is said that he had grown jealous of the supreme pontiff, wishing to be seated on the throne of Peter himself, but he had been denied. Humiliated, he sulked into the bishopric of Avignon to slowly plot his revenge. His time came when those followers of his, who had joined the cult of Beelzebub in secret, opened the gates and welcomed their conquerors. In a single night, the city was overrun and turned into the vilest den of pestilent corruption this side of the gates of hell. In a mockery of the papal throne of Rome, the cult declared the opening of a Cathedral of Beelzebub in the great palace of the once beautiful city, issuing a direct challenge to the Bishop of Rome for the spiritual leadership of the continent. The traitorous cardinal now declared himself the anti-pope, and since that dark day he has sat on the seat, drowning in endless ceremonies to warped congregations of flies, untold billions strong. In a revolting parody of holy matrimony, this patriarch of Beelzebub married an enormous sow, bloated with Grail's disease, defiling thus the grand chapel of Avignon. This union spawned the first missionaries of the Black Grail. These creatures are a mix of unclean beasts and the high clergy of the cult. filled with missionary zeal to convert mortals to their cause with far greater autonomy and intellect than the soldiers of the Grail. These children of the Fly lead missionary warbands, which the Patriarch sends out to challenge the spiritual supremacy of God, rather than conquer the lands, as is the duty of the Order of the Fly. After many torturous years under rule of the cult, Avignon is now so ridden with the most virulent and unique strain of the Black Grail that its recovery seems to be a cause with no hope of success. The very earth is warped, and teems with parasites and maggots infected with the filth of Beelzebub, with trillions of eggs hatching each year to overwhelm the city with further decay. Every fateful force sent to raise the city has only succeeded in swelling the numbers of its monstrous inhabitants, as its would-be conquerors have succumbed to the power of the Black Grail, which never wanes in this accursed place. Thus a policy of containment has been chosen instead, as the servants of Beelzebub do not pursue an open policy of expansion. Because of this, significant forces are kept around the hinterlands of Avignon, both to contain the corrupt preachers of Beelzebub from infiltrating Europa, and to stop those deranged men and women who wish to join the ranks of the cult of their own free will, the number of which is disturbingly high despite the best efforts of the Church. In revenge, the Patriarch of Beelzebub sends out his own bands of missionaries to spread the ecstatic word of the Black Grail across the globe. On moonless nights, music like the buzzing of a million flies can be heard rolling over Avignon's decaying ramparts. Then the deformed but silver-tongued missionaries lead plague almoners, swollen oblates and thrall monks out of the gates and engage in battle against those who refuse to receive the joyous tidings of the Lord of the Flies. Many are stopped by the ever-vigilant patrols, but some make it through the cordon, and their corruption becomes a seed from which new infestations of the Black Grail spring forth.